besides the obvious that Vandergriff hadn't been all that good, what do you think's going on there?
I don't know, George. They just don't have players. I mean, they have 7 offensive touchdowns in 6 SEC games. Dylan Sampson has 8 himself. They've lost 7 SEC football games in a row on their home field. And they've gotten trucked a couple of times by the middle of the league. Auburn and South Carolina. Those aren't teams vying for playoff spots, George.
No.
They've lost 11 out of 13 home games in their building. And they brought an offensive coordinator in this year to play faster. And Stoops has put the governor on him. I mean, it's remarkable how bad they are. They've had 17 300-yard passing games in 12 years under Mark Stoops. This is a modern era. I mean, this was like not 1977.
Kelly, while we've got you on, I'm going to let you ask questions first, and Tony will read a prepared statement, which will serve as an apology.
Can y'all hear me?
Hey, Kelly, when you're out of range, I just want you to know I would never ever dunk on you. George tried to pull me into that, Kelly, but I won't be a party to something like that.
Well, if you were going to say something about me, then I'm going to say something about you. George said that since y'all didn't have a game, y'all had an open week, you probably got some rest, but I'm not sure that you got any rest by the look of you.
You can tell. Hey, you can tell by looking at me. There ain't a lot of rest around here, big boy.
Big boy.
Hey, do you think? Yeah, I heard y'all talking about Mark Stoops and his inadequate offense. Do you think Mark Stoops is on a hot seat?
No, he makes too much money, and
you think so?
You're not going to terminate a football coach after what happened with your basketball coach if you're Mitch Barnhart and you like your job. So the thing about Stoops is, though, he had the sense. These coaches know. He had the sense to try to get out of there last year. He tried to get that A&M job.
Yep.
Right.
And these guys know. These guys, look, this guy's been here. This is year number 12. Smart coach one time told me in basketball, Dave Odom, he said, Tony, after 1 decade, unless you're from there, you got to get out of there because they all get tired of your rubber chicken circuit speeches. Fans get tired of looking at you. Players don't hear you anymore. You know, there's just and now that there's big money in this stuff, 10 years now, to be one place for a dozen years is a minor miracle these days.
So let me ask let me ask both of you this.
All right.
If he had Kentucky at the level that he has had them for a long time, which is remarkable,
yeah,
couldn't you sort of connect some dots and say when Oklahoma shows Brent Venables the exit door, that Mark Stoops would be an obvious there?
If you're asking me, I think absolutely. I mean, that's a Stoops name. But like, what I was going to ask Tony and y'all, I mean, does he have enough on his resume now with what he's done at Kentucky to garner another job like that?
Last year, but not this year. Look, we are such a we're so captive of the moment in college sports that it almost doesn't make sense, George. Sometimes guys will win. I remember when that Gary Waters guy won 2 games at Kent State a couple years ago because a couple kids hit shots, and Arkansas couldn't wait to hire him. And that's what we all do. A guy will have 1 year. Now Clark Lee all of a sudden is a great coach, George. Know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's weird how the sport works. It's
but
really
to
strange.
me, the smart AD is the one who says, okay, this year is an outlier. This
Agreed.
guy, what he's done for 10 years at Kentucky is miracle stuff.
Agreed. And you would think, oh, I'll try and I'll overlook what happened there and let's bring him in. The problem with Stoops is he's a stodgy, conservative coach. It's hard to sell that to fan bases these days. Just is. Fan bases want Josh Heupel. They want flash. They want to go fast. They want to score points. We're in entertainment now.
Kelly?
That's my sense of it.
Did we lose him again?
Never sounded better. Never made more sense.
Oh, listen to this. Okay, try it.
No?
Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, try
All
it.
right, is there anything, Tony, that Kentucky does that gives you any concern for Tennessee Saturday?
So I had the great Larry Vaught on the show today, and I said, Larry, what does – because he was going by through this whole list of ills on Kentucky. I said, what does Kentucky do well? And he went like this. Kind of like that. They can't throw it. They don't run it. They're not protecting very well on offense. They've got two really good wide receivers, but they can't get the ball to them. Barian Brown's a nice player. Dane Key, those are two Tennessee kids. They're both really nice SEC football players.
But about the time you want to sell them down the river, they took Georgia to the mat.
Yep.
Well, I mean, did they, or did Georgia just sleepwalk? The thing about Georgia is, George, I'm convinced of this with Georgia in the last couple of years. They either circle you or they don't. And if you're one of those games they circle on your schedule, you better pre-medicate because you're getting ready to get you a triple dose of that stuff. And you can't tell me that the same Georgia team that shows up for Texas is the same Georgia team that showed up in some of those other games, because it's just not the case. And their roster's good enough that they can get away with that. Kentucky, I think, is the outlier in their deal this year is winning at Ole Miss. How'd they do that? How do we explain that?
It just means more.
Exactly. And I was thinking about you guys, because I can't imagine in the off week. The off week here was really a tough weekend to watch college football. There wasn't a lot of great games. Man, that Vanderbilt team, guys, is really impressive. Really. Like, when I bring it up on my show, Tennessee fans don't want to hear this. Kentucky's got a credible, formidable football team this year. Very good at what they do. That was really impressive. Really impressive with Texas over the weekend.
Kelly, keep going if you got anything.
So Tony, what do you talk? Yeah, Tony, if you're looking at it, Vanderbilt, last game of the season, they got to go down to Georgia. Tennessee's got to go down to Georgia. We can say what we want to, but just like you talked about, they're ready to play. It's at home. They're going to be tough. But just how big could that last game be for Tennessee to make this top 12 against Vanderbilt?
Huge. Tennessee's easiest path into that playoff, I don't think it's their only path, but it's their easiest path, obviously, is to win the Georgia game. Because if they don't, and it's left in the hands of a committee, in a year where Tennessee's opponents just aren't cooperating, I mean, it is a year where, and I don't think Alabama's done losing. I really don't. It's a year where their opponents just, I mean, that poor Oklahoma program, guys, they are bottoming out. That thing is bottoming out. You brought up Venables before. That NC State team is completely bottoming out. I mean, it's unbelievable. And so Florida, I mean, that Florida team they're wretched. This Kentucky team we're seeing, they're not what they've been in recent years. It's really strange. Tennessee's clearest path in, obviously, is to beat Georgia, because if they don't, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be a coin flip at 10-2 as to whether or not the Vols get in. They really are going to need some help from here, guys. They really are.
So, Tony, each Monday, I'll just sort of put my own little bracket together and put it on the show. Mm-hmm. I had Tennessee and Texas playing each other as an 8-9, and in fact, there you see it.
Wow.
I'm curious what you think the committee will do if it's a one-loss Indiana?
George, one-loss Indiana's going to get in. They're going to get in. Now, do they play Ohio State closely? They play Ohio State closely, George. They're going to walk into the playoff. Not only are they going to get in, they're going to walk in. And the weird thing about that playoff, George, is we don't know their criteria. Nobody's saying anything. Another thing from Tennessee's perspective I keep going back to that Indiana has is the style points. Indiana is covering and beating people and beating up on people, and they're really, really – George, they won with that backup quarterback, Taven Jackson, and so smart of their offensive staff. They looked at him after that first throw of the second half, and they said, son, you're handing the ball off the rest of this half. And we're going to run – they're going to run – yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I watched it with you. You're exactly right.
Incredible. I mean, it was a great win by them. And I say incredible because the Signetti guy, everybody looked at him and said, you're crazy. You can't win there. And he said, okay, watch. I'm going to take guys that were with me now at James Madison, and I'm going to win there. I'm going to show you there's a lot of good football players all over the place, and I'm not going to make any excuses. And I find that story refreshing. I hope it doesn't come back and cost the Vols a spot. But if they go 11-1, George, and play Ohio State, just a credible game.
Right.
I don't think you can keep them out of there.
Okay, Billy, put that graphic back up there. So, Tony, I've got this theory, and you tell me if you buy it or you think it's hogwash. So, right now, you've got the four that would be, a first-round bye. If the season ended today, these are probably the four. A&M, even though I don't believe they're better than Georgia, I'll have to see that to believe it. But I do wonder if there will come a point where a new set of rules will say, look, just because you're the conference champion, it does not give you an automatic bye. It guarantees you'll get in, but your worthiness will decide where you are.
Boy, George, that's a great point. See, and this is going to come down to, at the end of the year, how we're going to deal with these conference championship games, because you're projecting here, okay?
Right.
And so I will say to anybody listening, how do we deal with conference championship games? And we've wrestled with this on the air, and I wrestle with it off the air. They have to make them matter, George, because they're a part of the formula. If they only make them window dressing, if they only treat them as exhibition games at the end of the year and don't base seeding off of them, then we're wasting our time playing them. In a lot of ways, they are another, if you think about it, they're another layer to the postseason. And I think they're going to really make them matter. And here's what I mean. I think that teams are going to help or hurt themselves at the end of the year, and they have to because they're playing these games. And the SEC and the Big Ten are not going to give back those paychecks. And so, George, I think they're going to have to keep the conference, the teams that win the conference championship, that unless it's egregious. In other words, unless a 3-loss A&M team beats an undefeated Georgia team and they haven't faced each other all year, in that scenario, otherwise, in that scenario, Georgia would go ahead of them in terms of 1-4. But otherwise, I think they're going to have to honor the teams that win those championship games in those spots. I've thought long and hard about it. If you're going to have them, you have to honor those teams in that spot, I think.
Kelly, his argument's better than mine.
I agree, man. I hadn't thought about that. He's probably right. I don't know. I like your argument, George. I like Tony's argument, but you're right. You got to make the conference championship. I hadn't thought about that. He's obviously put some thought into that in his long hours. But I think he may be right. They're going to have to do something to it. And if you do win the championship game, that's got to mean something.
Well, and my point is, guys, you can't look the other way. If you're going to keep those a part of the formula, then you got to bake them in, and you've got to make them count. Otherwise, most fans in year 2 will go, why in the world would I go to that game? I got the playoffs coming up. Why would I waste my money to go to Atlanta when I'm just going to keep my powder dry, watch that thing on television, even if I watch it? If you turned into enough of an exhibition game, why would I even look at it?
It's a really good point.
It's interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
So let me end it this way. In recent weeks, people's feeling about Nico has gone down some. Do you think in this 10 to 14 days that they've had open, you think they've been able to do anything that we'll notice in the weeks to come on him?
Oh, I think what happened to him, George, now that I've talked to people, they gave him way too much. He, early in the year, looked so good that they laid it on him. And then he went out against Oklahoma and looked like an 18-year-old kid, which is what he is, or a 19-year-old kid, extremely inexperienced kid who hadn't played a lot of football.
You're saying they threw the whole playbook at him.
There's no question.
Yeah.
Now they've dialed it back. And so they're going to start reintroducing things to him at a slower and fairer rate to him. You know, look, when you have people in the game like the Nick Sabans and the Urban Meyer telling people, hey, I had to call my friends, pulled off the side of the road, and hey, you got to watch this guy. You got to turn this. I know they're playing Chattanooga. But you got to watch this guy you got to watch this. You know, when these guys are saying those kinds of things, you can't blame Tennessee internally for going, hey, we got the chosen one. The truth is, I think they overloaded him a little bit. And Kelly has a saying on here that I like, which I think is accurate, because I learned a lesson through this. Not everybody can play that position at a really high level, and it's not for everybody. And it's a really hard thing to do. And, you know, I think Nico's a really good kid. I think he's got a solid infrastructure around him, and I'm rooting for him. But me dubbing him a superstar and people like me that do what I do, we weren't doing that kid any favors. And so I'm just going to watch this thing develop from here and hope he turns out to be a pretty good quarterback during his time here. He's not there yet. I hope they can put it together this weekend. Hey, this Kentucky team they're playing has flat out quit. I mean, let's just call this what it is. And Tennessee needs to – they're working on a scoreless first-half streak of 3 games, George, that dates back to the early 1960s. We're talking 61-year-old record that they set last week. It better not continue. They better score some points. They ought to put 3 scores up on this Kentucky bunch, because these guys – I mean, let's just call this what it is. These guys blow out loud. I mean, they are what they are. They can't play. These guys can't play.
Okay, we're going to end this quick, because when we go to the break, after the break, Terry McCormick's going to join us from Yankee Stadium.
Nice.
Billy, I need a 1-word answer, and I need you to put yourself on camera. In the month of October, have you sent Tony a resume?
Look at him.
Of course I have.
I love that young man.
That's not one word, Billy. Listen to the instructions. 1 word.
Shut up, Kelly.
Yes or no?
Shut up, Kelly. 1 word.
Oh, man.
Hey, Billy, my DMs are always open, Billy.
You got it.
Oh, gosh.
Okay, Tony, how can somebody hear you not only Saturday night, but anytime if they have listened to this witty repartee and said, this cat's good?
Why?
Well, I don't know why. I don't know why.
T-Club.team. Find us. Again, T-Club.team. Hey, listen, guys, a real highlight of my week is hanging out with you guys, which speaks to, I think, where my life is at this point. But I really –
Same here.
Hey, Kelly, safe travels and great talking. Love you.